live on Insta in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I think we're live on both.
Oh, yep, you are.
Hi, guys.
Hello, everybody.
I don't know if anyone's there.
I don't know. I send me a request here. I'll send you.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi, Megan. Hi, Sterling Speaks. Hi, Mule Bell. Hello, hello. Welcome in. What's up? Not them. Happy Friday.
Hello, everybody.
All right, let's get Dr. Q in here. Thank you for coming. It makes me so excited to see you guys. Hi, good afternoon, King Steven.
Instagram is the best.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you guys. Ah!
There
All
we
right, we
are.
have Dr. Q here.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Sabrina. Hello. How are you doing?
We're doing
Yaya
good.
Oyiza. I'm good. I'm good, guys. All right, so let's get started. You guys have to excuse this. A lot of sun in my room here. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat below. We're going to answer as many as we can. Hi, Mid. Drop where you're tuning in from. I want to see what places that I haven't visited yet that I'm still to put on my list of places to visit. Y'all, I just came back from Oman in the Middle East. 24-hour flight to Oman.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't tell Dr. Q that because I didn't want to worry him. But I'm here. I'm back in one piece.
Wow, 24 hours. That is
24 hours flight.
well, I went to India and it was 12 or 14 hours. So 24, that's a long time.
Yeah. Okay, I see Nebraska, Midwest, NYC,
Jacksonville.
Alabama. How do you say that? Roanoke, Virginia? And I already see our first question. Should we dive right into it?
I'm ready.
Don't people with sickle cell with this disease have yellow eyes? My eyes are yellow.
Yeah, that's really common in sickle cell disease, particularly if you have hemolysis or if your red blood cells break down more. So generally speaking, and I don't know if it's for you, but generally speaking, if you have hemolysis, your hemoglobin is a little bit lower. It's like maybe 7 or even 6.5, something like that. It just means you're processing hemoglobin through your liver, which makes bilirubin, which then causes your eyes to be yellow. The palms of your hands might look a little bit yellow. Um, I mean, sometimes people will tell you to drink more water, like it's going to wash it out. But really, what you have to do is talk to your provider, and if you're not on hydroxyurea or something else, then maybe you should be on some kind of medication that will decrease the hemolysis, which nowadays turns out to be hydroxyurea just about only. But it is an issue.
Yes, it's very common within sickle cell. In places like, well, I've heard in Nigeria, a lot of people want to try and hide their yellow eyes because it's an indicator, like it pretty much tells people that you have sickle cell. And when people are hiring, of course, there's discrimination against those living with sickle cell, hiring them. And so people are always wondering how to clear yellow eyes with sickle cell. And, you know, it is that bilirubin, the breakdown of the red blood cells, has this byproduct called bilirubin. It builds up and you see it in your skin, you see it in your eyes. My mom is always like, I don't know if I get yellow eyes or not, not as often, but my sister does. And my mom was always like, look at your eyes are yellow. Go drink water now. And so um, that's pretty much the course of action there for that. But it is common. You are not alone. It's quite common in sickle cell to have yellow eyes. So one of the very few outward things about sickle cell is the yellow eyes. Otherwise, it's pretty much an invisible condition. So know that you're not alone for that. Um, y'all, this sun here. Uh, I'm seeing some questions about some of the drug therapies. I was taking Oxbryta. My hematologist took me off because of the side effects and the recall. Yes, that happened to everyone globally that was taking Oxbryta, including myself. I was taking Oxbryta too. I'm no longer on Oxbryta as well. And we were actually just having a conversation surrounding Oxbryta and, what next steps could look like. I know that there will be some sort of presentation of the data on why this was withdrawn, and this was through Pfizer. And so we look forward to seeing a little bit more on why. And some of the side effects. Did you have side effects taking Oxbryta, or did you notice a difference? And how are you feeling now? I'd be curious to understand how you're doing now that you're no longer on Oxbryta. Dr. Q, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, Oxbryta, I was never a big fan of Oxbryta.
Well, who wasn't?
Yeah, Cassandra knows that. But anyway, so basically, Oxbryta um, changes your hemoglobin to latch onto oxygen more avidly, very much more avidly. And so what that does is it holds your hemoglobin in the oxygenated position, and so then it can't sickle. Okay, so that seems like a good thing, but the problem with that is that it holds onto your oxygen, so it's not available to the rest of your body. So if you were taking voxelotor, Oxbryta, and 20% of your hemoglobin was bound up with the drug and was always in the oxygenated position, that means 20% of your hemoglobin can't release oxygen to your tissues. And there are some congenital diseases where there's a more avid, the hemoglobin hooks onto oxygen more avidly. And in those diseases, the hemoglobin goes up. So that's what happens with Oxbryta. You take it and your hemoglobin goes up, but it barely compensates for the fact that some of your hemoglobin can't release oxygen. And so it's like there's the oxygen that's in your blood, but then there's like oxygen that's available to you to be released to your tissues. And when you take voxelotor, what you see, your hemoglobin goes to 9 or 10 or whatever it is. That doesn't mean you have normal hemoglobin that's 10. It means your hemoglobin went up, but some of that is not available to deliver oxygen to your tissues. So that was the problem. And some of the studies that were done showed that it showed that it wasn't really for instance, Oxbryta did in studies didn't decrease pain, and the reason for that was because it's not releasing the oxygen to your tissues. So I'm there are studies now that have been published that show that taking that medication wasn't helpful for people with sickle cell disease. And the FDA was what I'll tell you just So the FDA, what they do is they take if a drug company wants their drug to be have an expedited approval, what they'll do is they will pick a surrogate or a marker for something that the drug does, and if they can show that the drug does that, then the drug gets a provisional approval. And in the case of oxalitor, it was it raised your hemoglobin. So yeah, it raised your hemoglobin. So the FDA uh, uh, approved the drug provisionally because of that marker. But then when they do that, they say, well, in the next 3 years, you have to prove that not only does it do that, but it does something good for the people who take it. It improves their uh, sickle cell disease on some level more than just raising the hemoglobin. And as more studies came out, it was pretty clear that it didn't. And so when Pfizer reviewed those, I'm sure they reviewed those studies and other studies that never got published, they realized that it wasn't it wasn't helping people with sickle cell. And in the EU, um, their equivalent to the FDA was investigating Oxbryta because they also felt like the studies didn't show that it was helpful for people with sickle cell. So this was sort of the drug. Pfizer took it off the market before the FDA or the European Union took it out. So it was going to happen one way or the other. It's really sad because I think personally, I think the FDA should be more stringent about how they give that they approve the drugs.
All right. I see a question about bone marrow transplant. This person said, I have sickle cell, but I got a bone marrow transplant. I'm scared sickle cell might come back. Any thoughts about that? And they said, I don't have sickle cell anymore, but I have sickle cell trait. Will it come back later or in the future?
It shouldn't. I mean, the people who have had are 10 years out from a bone marrow transplant, they're fine. Um, but it's one and it shouldn't come back. But it's one reason why you should check in with the transplant team at least, well, probably more frequently than annually initially, every few months. And then at some point, they're going to tell you, we want to see you every year. And you should go every year to that appointment because they will evaluate how the bone marrow graft is working and whether it's doing better or not so bad or whatever. And if that's important just for you as an individual to know that everything's okay, but it's also important for other people with sickle cell disease to know that there's X numbers of people who have had a bone marrow transplant, they're out 10 years and they're doing okay. And if nobody comes to those follow-ups, then that kind of data can't be published, which is a shame, actually.
Have you ever heard of any case studies of a bone marrow transplant reverting back or, reverting back to sickle cell?
Sure, that does happen occasionally. It's rare. More common is that during the in the early parts of the transplant, the bone marrow just doesn't engraft at all, and the sickle cell comes back. That's more common. I think I'm not a transplanter, but I think that's more common than having the graft fail out years from the transplant.
Okay. I've been recently given Indari. I already take hydroxyurea. What benefits can I expect?
I think over time you should you should have less pain. You should basically just generally feel better. There's no it's an antioxidant, so it may there hasn't been that much. I looked for things. I was looking in the literature. There hasn't really been that much published since it was approved.
Yeah.
So it's not clear, like there hasn't been a paper that says, well, after taking Endori for 5 years, this is the case, or 10 years. It's been approved for a while. But I think what you should just have fewer pain episodes, and you should, just generally feel a little bit better. I don't think it's going to be dramatic, but I think you should over time realize, oh, I used to, go to the emergency room twice a month, but I haven't been for 3 months or 4 months. And then you know that it's working.
So less hospitalizations essentially. And I think that was an endpoint of that initial
Yeah. So
study.
unlike voxelotor, Endari actually did decrease pain episodes.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Q, here's one for you. I'm laughing because I know how Q feels about homeopathic and alternative medications. Do you know of any homeopathic treatments?
Well, homeopathy is this idea that you take a small dose of something and that has a bigger effect. So no, I don't know of any homeopathic medications that or treatments that work for sickle cell disease. I think even though I'm uh, skeptical of everything, um, there, there are a lot of naturally occurring um, treatments for sickle cell disease, and I think one of the issues in the pharmaceutical or the drug development um, uh, scenario is that some of these that are potentially could be helpful are not really researched by people, and there are not studies done. A lot of the studies are, to show that something really works, you have to have a study with hundreds of people, and in sickle cell disease that's hard to do. But I think there are some naturally occurring treatments that could have potential, but just have never been evaluated, because if you're a pharmaceutical company or somebody else, that's not going to make any money for you if it's something that occurs naturally. And the drug companies are there to make lots of money, which they do.
Yeah. There's a follow-up question here that I want to address. This is surrounding Oxbrite, voxelotor. Somebody says, so me feeling like it gave me more energy was a placebo effect.
Uh,
I felt like it gave
I
me more energy.
Yeah, I don't think it's a placebo effect. But it could. I mean, I think if you have sickle cell disease, you're just more attuned to your body and what's going on with it than people generally. I mean, so I think having your hemoglobin go up could have helped a little bit in your feeling, but if you were exercising, you wouldn't notice that, oh, hey, I can run faster now, or I can walk longer. I don't think that shouldn't have been what was going on. But you might just generally feel a little bit better. I'm sure there's somewhat of a placebo effect for everything, hydroxyurea, It goes both ways. Some people think hydroxyurea is doing bad things that it's not doing. Because there is a nocebo effect. So placebo effect means you think it's better than it is, and nocebo effect is you think it's worse than it actually is. So it actually does go both ways.
I like to think I'm immune from the placebo effect. No, for real. Because sickle cell is just so physical, so visceral, right? Like it's just so there that like if you gave me a sugar pill and I'm waiting to feel the effect and I don't, like I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Do you guys feel like that too? Like I think with obviously like mental stuff really, does help things, but yeah, I wish my mind was that powerful to like thwart that type of pain. Like that's actually what I would hope for. Like to take a sugar pill and have my crisis go away and have that all be mental. That would be amazing. I actually read this one book of this yogi who, and it's why I started getting into yoga a little bit, but then I fell off. But he could like sit on hot, cold, or be in this like extreme pain situation and not have it phase him. And as somebody living with sickle cell, that was very, very appealing to me because like to have that much control over your mind to not feel pain would be amazing. But I don't know. I don't know. I That's kind of why I don't think the placebo effect works on me, but that's just me.
I, I think the placebo effect for someone with sickle cell might work initially. They might feel like they're feeling better, but if it didn't really affect the, their pain or anything like that, I think at some point you might realize, well, wait a minute, this isn't really, I'm still having as much pain as I had before or something like that. But it's a real thing. It's like you want something to work, so you psychologically feel like it's going to work. But with sickle cell, like you say, it's a physical thing. You can't wish away
I wish I
sickle
could. I
sickle
really
cell.
wish I could. Um, okay. We getting through these questions, guys. Okay. Let's see what we have next. How do you feel about gene therapy? My new hematologist recommended that I look into it.
Gene therapy is transformative. They call it transformative because it is. So gene therapy is really has a lot of potential. Being the skeptic that I am, you have to wonder, is it durable? So it seems like I think it would be. I don't see any reason
And
why it
by
wouldn't.
durable, you mean like will it last? Like will it
Yeah, is it
last
gonna?
forever like it's supposed to
Yeah,
last forever? Or
like
will
a
it
bone marrow, like the person with the question about, is my bone marrow transplant ever going to go south and I'm going to have sickle cell again because the donor had sickle cell trait? Well, history tells us that people are out 10 years from their bone marrow transplant and they're still fine. Um, with gene therapy, nobody knows that because it hasn't been around long enough to know whether it will be durable, and 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it will your the effect of the gene therapy will still be there. There's no reason to think it wouldn't be. In fact, I just think personally, I think it's probably it's probably durable. It's going to go forever as long as you're. Um, it's the kind of the downside of it to me is that it's really expensive. It's like $3 million or something like that. So you have to have somebody, some insurance company, which some have, pay for that. There's no way
and there are
you,
there are insurance companies paying for it.
yeah. So if your insurance company will pay for it, then I would, you know, you have with therapies like this, you have to personally be convinced that it's going to work. You don't want to have a bone marrow transplant, gene therapy, when in the back of your mind you're thinking, you're nervous, this isn't going to work. I don't think this is going to work. You really need to talk to people and have a pretty good, know what the side effects are, know what the potential downsides are, and then realize that the upsides over override that. That the good part of it is way, way, way better than the possibility that something unfortunate is going to happen. And then when you go into it, you've got your eyes open, you know what you're getting into. But I think gene therapy it's going to get gene therapy and the type of therapies there are in the next 10 years or so, 15 years, are really going to be way different and much safer than they are now. But you don't want to wait 10 or 15 years for your gene therapy if you could get it today.
Okay, we got a lot of good questions here. Um, does an individual with sickle cell always experience pain, or are there instances where a person is diagnosed but never feels pain?
There's hemoglobin S with hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin.
Yeah,
So that's what one of the gene therapies
a lot
goals
of them
is
actually.
to create hereditary. It affects the regulator for fetal hemoglobin, and so your fetal hemoglobin goes up, just like you had hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin. So if your fetal hemoglobin is 30% or even more, then you don't have any symptoms of sickle cell disease, because fetal hemoglobin actually inhibits sickling. And if it's that much of your hemoglobin will go up and you'll feel better and you won't have symptoms. And people who have the sickle cell gene plus hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin don't have any symptoms of sickle cell disease. And that's why that therapy is successful. So yeah, there are people who technically have sickle cell disease, but they also have hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin. And there's people who just have high fetal hemoglobin for other reasons.
Yeah.
And those people have fewer symptoms of sickle cell disease. And one of the reasons why people take hydroxyurea is that it does increase your fetal hemoglobin. And if it increases your fetal hemoglobin to about 20% or more, your symptoms of sickle cell disease should be considerably less.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of, like Dr. Q said, a lot of the gene therapies that you see today are trying to target the gene to turn on that fetal hemoglobin to stop sickling. So fetal hemoglobin is essentially anti-sickling. But there are some people who are naturally born with that gene not turning off, and they still have that fetal hemoglobin, which counteracts sickle cell. So if you're not born that way, gene therapy is a way to um, fix your genes so that it does, that's the outcome that you have. And so that's a lot of the approaches to gene therapy, which is why they don't really call it curative, because even somebody with persistent fetal hemoglobin still has sickle cell disease. And so that's why they don't really call it curative. It's just kind of turning on that switch to produce a lot of fetal hemoglobin while sickle cell is still in the background. But that fetal hemoglobin is kind of canceling out sickle cell, but sickle cell is still there. So it wouldn't necessarily be cure, but it would be transformative. So that's why that language has been brought into this, because I feel like the cure to sickle cell would be correcting that mutation that causes sickle cell disease, and making sure that that correction, I guess, and maybe this is never going to be possible. You tell me, Dr. Q, that correction isn't passed on to children. And maybe there's just different ways. There are different ways of defining cure, right? But to me, that seems like the most direct term of what a cure is correcting that mutation. While these other approaches aren't necessarily correcting that mutation, they're just changing your genes to kind of offset sickle cell, so to speak. Um,
There,
anything to add to that?
It's
Anything to add
well,
11.
to that?
CRISPR Cas9, which is the gene, the therapy that actually can go in and change base pairs or take the sickle hemoglobin out and put in normal sickle hemoglobin. That kind of therapy would be, again, you can't really, if they would be at more curative than what we have now, because they would actually change the hemoglobin in your DNA, in your, you know, they remove cells from your body, and those cells would no longer act like sickle cells. And when they infuse them back into your body after a conditioning regimen and they engrafted, then they would be producing normal hemoglobin. It's in terms of having, I can't think of a therapy that would actually change your ability, would change your genetics and your um, uh, to make it so that people with sickle cell after that could have children without sickle cell or sickle cell trait. But those therapies are coming. So that's what I'm talking about. In the next 10 or 15 years, there will be therapy where they change the base pair and you correct that in the cells that they infuse, and you'll make normal hemoglobin.
Hi, Dr. Z, if you're still on. Dr. Z came and said hi, Dr. Zaidi. I actually was with him in Oman. So very, very, very fun. Um, okay. Hopefully that answers your question. I have one here, and it's a good question. If there are people who, outside of those who have persistent fetal hemoglobin, are there people who just don't experience pain?
Not that I know of. I mean, they. I'm trying. I If you have hemoglobin SS, and you don't, if you have sickle hemoglobin and you don't have fetal hemoglobin, I don't know. I don't think so, but it's
What about
another.
one of those rare types like
There,
SG
there
or
could be there could be a rare person who has who inherited a different hemoglobin that maybe would not be affected. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any instance when that would happen.
yeah. But sickle cell varies from person to person, so I would never say never for sickle cell, especially as given as complex as it is. So there could be a person there, but I feel like these are rare cases that we're talking about and not necessarily the general or the typical case.
Right. So, like what Cassandra is saying is, it, siblings who both have the same parents, they do not have the same manifestation of sickle cell disease. Some are more mild than others. So what that means is if you have the same parents, two siblings inherited SS, one has mild disease and one has more severe disease. It tells you that there are other things that are modulating the manifestation of sickle cell disease. So we don't, as far as I know, we don't, besides fetal hemoglobin, I'm not sure people really know what those other modulators are. But it means that it's not inconceivable that somebody would have sickle cell and have very mild symptoms if they if this confluence of these modulators was just right. The thing there is that they might not ever be discovered, because if you don't, without, if they didn't have newborn screening, you wouldn't, and they were not having symptoms, they might not be diagnosed with sickle cell disease. In this country, everybody gets newborn screening, so people would know whether you had sickle cell disease or not.
Okay. I have here, I did a urine culture and it states that protein or that protein is in my urine. Can that be a side effect from hydroxyurea?
Uh, it sounds like you had a urinalysis, not a urine culture. But protein in your urine is a sign that everybody who has sickle cell disease, maybe unless they started hydroxyurea when they were young children, is going to have some degree of renal disease. They're going to have some amount of protein in their urine, which is a sign of renal disease. So it depends on a level of protein will determine the severity and other things. Well, but will determine the severity of your renal disease. And the only way to know that for sure is to collect urine, a large urine sample, and then check for protein and other things in that.
All right. My next question I have here is I've been scheduled for a hip replacement surgery, but I'm scared because the leg is atrophied. What is your advice on this, please?
So if you I would have your hip replaced, especially if you have a lot of pain. And if you have physical therapy, your leg may, the muscle mass in your compared to your leg without AVN, they may never look exactly the same. But you can replace muscle mass after your hip replacement. Um, it takes a lot of physical therapy, um, and it would take a long time, but it's possible that you would get your strength back in that leg and you would increase your muscle mass. Your muscles will maybe atrophy, but the cells are still there. And if you exercise, that's why when you lift weights, you can get really bulky, is because the muscle cells themselves can get bigger and stronger. So after your hip replacement, you should feel better, be able to walk, and over time your muscle mass will return, especially if you have physical therapy, somebody helping you do that.
Yeah, the muscle in my leg atrophied when I had AVN and I had to get a hip replacement as well. And now you don't even notice the difference between the two, where both of my legs look pretty. I like to think they look pretty even, hopefully. If it doesn't, nobody's told me. But yeah, I would suggest getting the hip replacement as well. I did the other option that was given to me before hip replacement was a core decompression. I tried that. Works for some people. It doesn't work for other people. It did not work for me. So I ended up having to get the replacement. And I got relief. I got pain relief right after the surgery. So it's not something you have to wait for and see, oh, gradual pain and release, like pretty immediately, and you get relief pretty immediately. I will say for me personally, and this is just my personal experience, I do have some pain associated with my hip, generally when the weather changes, but this is a me thing. But I just want to make sure people are aware. It's a different kind of pain. It's not the same kind of pain as the AVN pain. It's more of like an ache. So sometimes I'll get that, but other than that, my hip looks good. And I actually saw my what's the doctor that sees does bone pain, bone stuff.
Orthopedic.
I
Sir.
saw my orthopedic. I'm 11 years out from my hip replacement. My hardware, like my replacement, still looks good. Everything looks fine. So I'm so happy about that. So yeah, yeah, another thing. You'll just keep following up with your orthopedic doctor after the hip replacement. And I think they do it like once every 5 years. And then as you get closer to the end of the expiration of the hardware, then you start seeing them on an annual basis. I'm not there yet, but yeah, they got some pretty good stuff out there. I thought I had to, get it replaced or like get change out some of the hardware, but I don't. And at least not for another 10 years. So
Yeah, I don't, I'm not a orthopedic surgeon for sure, but I think the hardware they're putting in now is better than it was, say, 10
yeah,
or 20 years
that's
ago,
what they said.
because when I started doing this, people would say, well, in 5 or 10 years, you might need another hip replacement because the hardware will wear out. But the most of the people I know that have had hip replacements with sickle cell, they're out 10 years, 15 years, and the hardware's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love these questions, the sophistication. Here's one. Your thoughts, Dr. Q, on remote monitoring of sickle cell patients. Example, biometrics tracking to give patients and physician uh, analysis if patients will have a crisis. And I'm super into this, like biometrics. You know how they say you can't, labs don't tell you if you're in pain, right? Um, and so therefore, providers might send you home because labs don't indicate, which is completely wrong, completely off. But biometrics would be something that could indicate potentially that you are having a crisis, and that could help maybe predict an oncoming crisis. And so I love this science. There's a lot of people working within biometrics within sickle cell. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there is great potential in that. And Samir Ballas, who is no longer with us, was an expert on pain, and he created a little. He used a lot of people's experiences with pain and created a chart that's been used over and over to show what happened to all your different red blood cells, your platelets, and during a sickle cell event. So it's definitely possible to pick up sickle cell events early, especially if you have other biomarkers to look at. And I think that would be really, really helpful to get. I mean, it wouldn't actually change anything, but it would get you to go to see a physician for treatment before the pain got way out of control.
Yeah.
But and this is a question for Cassandra. But I think a lot of people with sickle cell disease, they know they're having a pain episode before it gets really bad, but they don't go to see a physician, especially in an emergency room, because they feel like they're not going to be believed, or they're not going to get very good treatment, or they're going to get hassled. Oh, you can't tell me what kind of medicine you need because I'm the doctor and I'm going to tell you what you're going to get, kind of thing. Um, Biometrics might circumvent around that, but you'd have to get buy-in from people who weren't sickle cell doctors to say, I can just see you have this device or monitor, and the emergency room doctor says, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't think you're in pain. You don't look like you're in pain to me. I'm not going to do anything. You'd have to have a setup where there was a buy-in for that, so that when you went before you were in a really bad crisis, that somebody could do something to stop that from happening or treat you before it got really, really bad.
And can you imagine a world that living in a world where, we would have an at-home kit where we could kind of track
Yeah.
our crisis and, there's an Apple Watch app or something that says, oh, you're about to go into crisis, either, do this, do that, or whatever, or go into clinic. That's the world I want to live in. So, but without it, we would need biometrics and studies within and research within biometrics. And I think somebody even said to me in conversation one time that they were looking at saliva to see if there were any indicators of crisis within saliva. And so it's extremely, extremely interesting. But to know that there are researchers working at this, right, and that this could be a possibility so that we could better manage crisis, or at least sickle cell, half of the burden of sickle cell is that unpredictability of sickle cell. And so to have that power, it feels empowering to know, hey, let me not make plans for tomorrow because this app says that I'm, 50% likely to go into a pain crisis tomorrow or something like that. So yeah, it's exciting stuff. It's why it's important to continue to collect data and, to participate in research like this so that we can get to a point where we do have tools outside of drug therapies to help better manage and navigate sickle cell. Yeah.
Right. There are inflammatory markers for sure that could be
Okay.
looked at to say that, to tell you that you were going to have pain in the next 24 hours or something.
Yeah. All right. Any opinions on GLP-1 for weight loss among people with sickle cell?
I don't
And can you
know.
explain what GLP-1 is? Because that's not something I've ever heard of.
Those are the drugs that affect your appetite, and they're the drugs that people use in order to lose weight.
Okay,
And
just like Ozempic.
yeah,
Okay,
and
okay.
so you get a shot, and then every week or so, every couple of weeks, and it decreases your appetite, and you can lose 20% of your body weight. Um, I I would have to look, but I think I did see an article that said that showed that people with sickle cell disease, just like everybody else, it didn't really, except for the weight loss, it didn't really have any effect on people with sickle cell disease. They responded to the medication just like everybody else, and it didn't, there were no other side effects associated with sickle cell disease when you took that.
Yeah.
If you're, you really need to be followed by your sickle cell doctor to make sure that you need that drug. But really, if you have sickle cell disease and your BMI, your really need to lose weight, it could really help your sickle cell disease in terms of your hips, your pain, everything. But I would definitely talk to your provider about that, because most people with sickle cell disease are not overweight. They're actually a little thinner.
I thought my slimness was because I was doing a good job exercising and staying.
Well, that helps. Well, if you watch TV and eat chips all day, that's not good for
I
you.
do that too. All right. I am I've never heard of a word on here, so you have to excuse me if I mispronounce this. I'm 48 years old and have menopause. Do you think I have to do chirurgy to take off my ovaries?
I'm not sure what. Um, People with sickle cell disease go through menopause a little bit early. There are definitely medications to take well, during menopause to decrease the symptoms. I'm not sure what that medication is, but it's something you need to talk to your OBGYN about, and they can help you have fewer symptoms and not have a lot of the side effects of going through menopause. Again, you always have to talk to your sickle cell provider when people start prescribing medications to you for you to make sure they're okay with your sickle cell disease.
Okay. Here is a question I haven't ever seen. Does sickle beta and sickle alpha thalassemia need the antibiotics as much as required when breastfeeding newborns and toddlers? I ask because the medication basically um, antagonizes the breastfeeding.
So if you have what's called S beta plus thalassemia, and your hemoglobin A is, relatively higher, people those people do not get treated the same as adults. They don't get treated the same as somebody who has sickle cell disease. So the recommendations is for people with hemoglobin SS to take penicillin until they're at least 5 years old and maybe even longer. But as an adult, especially with S beta plus thalassemia, people might stop your uh, penicillin at 3 years or somewhere between 3 and 5, and you should and that would be the end of it, because people with S beta plus thalassemia, although they can have sickle cell symptoms, they can have splenic sequestration. I've seen people with that have AVN with S beta plus thalassemia, but generally infections are less severe or less frequent in people with S beta plus thalassemia. Having S thalassemia in and of itself, if it's not, if the hemoglobin A isn't high, may not be protective. But if you've been told you have S beta plus thalassemia, then you're probably okay not taking. But again, you got to talk to the provider, because they would know whether you were at risk or not.
Yes, this live will be saved. It stays on our Instagram page. So if there's a part that you missed or something that you wanted to follow up with, our lives are always saved. I think they're also on YouTube as well. So you can watch either on YouTube or Instagram. I just want to call out this comment here. It says, all providers are not good providers. Mine kept giving me blood transfusions and never checked my ferritin. Thank God I moved. You're absolutely right, which is why I am a proponent of patient education so that you know that, and you shouldn't have to. Let me just put that as a disclaimer. As a patient, you shouldn't have to be an expert. You shouldn't have to be an expert at your care, because what are doctors for then, you know? But everybody's human at the end of the day. These things slip. Maybe this provider never knew that you had to check ferritin, so they couldn't advise you, or maybe maybe they didn't like you very much, and both could be true, right? And so therefore, this is why I believe education is powerful, because you need to know that if you're getting transfused, you need to check your ferritin levels, because there's something called iron overload that can shut down your organs and essentially kill you. I wanted to call that particular comment out. You are absolutely right. Not all providers are good providers, but also, unfortunately, if you're living with sickle cell, you also have to take on that added burden of educating yourself to make sure that you are getting the appropriate care. There are too many lost lives because of misinformation or because of, just providers not knowing to advise their patients. And so we want to make sure that you feel equipped enough to see that situation, right? To see that you haven't checked your ferritin levels once, and you've had X amount of blood transfusions, and to know to either request it from your doctor or, like this person did, move on to the next doctor who knows a little bit better or a lot bit better, hopefully, fingers crossed. So thank you for that comment, because this is why we do the work we do at Sickle Cell 101, to make sure that you know all about this stuff. I feel like we all deserve honorary degrees. I really do. Because we're in the hospital all the time. We have to learn all this stuff. Like we're like, it's a good thing we're smart. Those, like we may not be able to do the sports and everything, but the one muscle that we do have that we can rely on is our brain. And a lot of people with sickle cell are very smart. I'll just go ahead and say that. I'll just say that. Anyway, so we got to use our brain, the muscle that we can use as much as we want to, and fill it with information like this. And just it's unfortunate and fortunate, I guess, that we have to do this, but it's just there's too much for human error to leave your life in the hands of somebody else. And so that's why I truly believe we have to make sure that we stay informed and educated about our disease. So thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. Anything to
And
add to that, Dr. Q?
well, I think you need to have someone who's you really feel is like your partner in your life with your sickle cell disease. You have to have a person who's open, that you feel you can talk to, and say, "Hey, I've been on chronic transfusions for 2 years. Shouldn't I get a ferritin every year or every 6 months or something? Can you tell me something about ferritin?" And feel like that's an okay thing to do. Or if you're on hydroxyurea and they haven't taken done labs for 3 or 4 months or whatever, to say, shouldn't I get my labs more often or something like that, and feel like that's an okay thing to do. I mean, when I was practicing, people would challenge me and say, "Hey, can you do this, or should I have this or that?" And I don't think my patients ever felt like they couldn't say whatever they wanted to me, because I was pretty open to that kind of stuff. So not only does your provider have to know a lot about sickle cell disease, they also have to be open to your queries about your health and what should be going on with you. The other thing you have to remember, I was fortunate that I was practicing at a sickle cell center. So there were a lot of patients with sickle cell disease, and there were doctors who had more experience than I did with sickle cell. So when I started, I got a lot of education about sickle cell disease from older people and also from the patients. And if you're, I don't know, in the middle of Kansas or something like that, you may the doctors don't take enough, they don't have enough sickle cell patients to know about sickle cell disease. You have to have experience in order to be a good doctor. And if you don't have very many patients, you just are never going to get that experience. So that's why one of the things with the sickle cell bill that's going through Congress right now is to try to get sickle cell centers reinstituted so that there can be these places where you can go where people have a lot more knowledge about sickle cell disease. If you have 10 patients, you're not going to know as much about sickle cell as you would if you had 100 or 300 or more. So that's one of the downsides. It is a rare disease for sure.
Okay. My daughter has sickle cell and was just diagnosed with moya disease. How risky is this surgery?
Uh, Surgery is as risky as the um, skill of the surgeon. So if you're and and having surgery for moya disease is a risky surgery. So
Mm,
what you want to know is how many times has your surgeon done the surgery? How effective has it been? Have there been how often have there been side effects? And in surgery and in medicine, if you do a lot of procedures, you're going to have some that have bad outcomes. That's just the way it is. And so if somebody says, "Well, they don't tell you how many they've done." Well, I've never had a problem with moya and doing surgery for moya. I've never. Then you have to start thinking, well, how many have you really done? Because if you've done 100, you're going to have a few really scary experiences doing that. And maybe the people did fine, but you personally were kind of as the surgeon, you were a little nervous about how the outcome was going to be. So it's really the surgeon that makes all the difference. You have to have someone who's done it before, who has a good track record, and who you can talk to. You really have to have a surgeon because it's such a difficult surgery, someone who you feel comfortable talking to, and you can ask them questions and what's the recovery going to be like, what are the bad side effects that could happen. But yeah, it's a difficult surgery. Any kind of neurovascular surgery is difficult.
so the goal is really to make sure that you have find an experienced surgeon.
Yeah,
As scary as this is, you want to find a good one. You want to find one that um, has experience within sickle cell particularly as well.
right.
So your homeworker, and you might already be doing this, is finding the best surgeon you can for such a risky surgery. And I just want to say best of luck to you. That
Yeah.
that can be scary as a parent, and I can't even imagine what you're going through with this. But I think the way you can equip yourself is, asking these important questions, finding somebody who, does have experience with that to give, your child the best shot at, recovery and so on and so forth. And so if you have any more questions surrounding this, because I can imagine you might, please feel free to send us an email. We can kind of, I say we like I'm doing the work, but Dr. Q, Dr.
But no, I
Q.
would. You really should ask at Sickle Cell 101, and
Yeah,
I'll work it out and I'll send you a response. But in reality, you may have to go someplace far. You may have to go outside of where you live
someplace
to find
far.
a
Yeah.
surgeon who can do this. This is not a routine surgery that's done every day, everywhere. It's a very specialized surgery, and you have to have a surgeon who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the outcome is not always predictable either. So you really need to have someone who's open enough and confident enough in their ability to treat you that they can just be honest with you.
Best of luck with that.
Yes.
Feel free to
Yeah.
reach out. Ask at sc101.org. Please feel free to reach out for that.
And we did have a neurosurgeon who did that when I was at Children's.
Here, if you're on the West Coast at UCSF.
Yeah.
Why do some people with sickle cell look pale and some look very healthy?
Well, it depends,
And I wonder, whoever asked this question, where am I on that scale?
you're on the good end. You don't look pale to
Okay.
me.
Because I
You're
just
pretty
wonder, yeah, I
healthy.
just wonder, it's all subjective, right? What does healthy look like? What does pale look like?
Yeah, yeah. I think it depends. As we were talking about earlier, siblings, brothers and sisters can have different. Their sickle cell can be completely different. They're not, even though they're same parents, same mutation, different outcomes of their sickle cell disease. And the other thing is, people who have sickle cell disease, they might not, they can have S beta plus thalassemia and they could, they have sickle cell disease, but those people are not going to be as anemic as you are. You could have SC disease and you still have sickle cell disease, but your hemoglobin's 11. And you can have S beta 0 thalassemia and your hemoglobin is 6. So sickle cell is not it's not like high blood pressure. It's a collection of really different diseases. So someone with S beta 0 thalassemia and someone with S beta plus thalassemia are not going to, and SC or some other variant are not going to be, they're not going to have the same course. So just because someone says they have sickle cell disease, unless you know what their diagnosis is, they may not be as sick as you are. And when you're in the waiting room and you're talking to other parents or other people with sickle cell, you don't know what kind of sickle cell they have. And even people with SS, some people really have a lot of problems and other people don't. And I don't think we as doctors know what. There's some, if you do investigation, you might be able to figure something out, but usually we don't really know why some people have a more severe course of sickle cell disease.
So does the paleness depend on the anemia, the amount of anemia? Is that the core? The
Yeah,
more anemic you are, the more pale looking you are.
right. Yeah, so if your hemoglobin is 7.5, you're going to be more pale than somebody whose hemoglobin is 11 or 12, which could be someone with SC, maybe not 12, but 11 with SC. So they would look pretty, in terms of their paleness, they would look normal, whereas someone with S beta 0 with a hemoglobin of 6 or 7 would look very pale.
Fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. Somebody says, anyone in the comments from JA? Where's JA? What's JA? Is that Jamaica? But I just want to, if anybody's from JA, let us know. All right, we have to wrap up here, but Jamaica. Okay, it is from Jamaica. Anybody, there's a big Jamaican community. So maybe not somebody on the live right now, but if you're looking to connect with somebody in Jamaica, let me know. I will tackle a few more questions. Is there anybody out there that didn't have their question answered? And if so, please put it in the chat because it means I've missed it. But as you're doing that, the next question I have here is, would you treat sickle beta the same way you would treat sickle cell anemia? These are two different types of sickle cell diseases. Sickle beta I'm guessing they mean sickle beta zero because there's even two types of sickle betas. There's sickle beta plus and sickle beta zero. So would you treat sickle beta zero and sickle cell anemia the same way?
Yes. So technically speaking, if you have S beta zero, that means you only have hemoglobin S in your, because the zero means you're not making hemoglobin on one gene and the other gene is S. So the only type of hemoglobin you have in your body is S. So both of those people, S beta zero, basically only have S circulating. What would make you treat anybody differently would be how their disease progressed. So some people with SS have worse symptoms than people with S beta zero. So you don't really go, at least I didn't go by what the diagnosis was, the genetics. I went by how the person presented clinically. And if they had problems, then we would do things to address those problems. That whether you have and like Cassandra saying, if you have S beta plus thal, there's a wide range because S beta plus only means that you have some hemoglobin A along with your S. And that percent can be 2%, 10%,
Yeah.
15%, and that's going to change the way S beta plus is for you. And I think I've told this story before, but I had a family where both kids had the same parents, and they came in and they said, "Oh well, what this child has S beta plus thalassemia, and this child has S beta zero thalassemia," and I'm like, that can't happen because whoever has the thalassemia either has plus or zero. There's no other thing. And it turned out the girl who had S beta, who they thought had S beta zero, had such a low level of hemoglobin A that
That it looked
when you did what's called hemoglobin electrophoresis, it looked like S beta zero, but it really wasn't.
interesting.
She just had a very low level of A.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Have you personally seen any difference with hydroxyurea being started with children versus adults? And I love this question. This is such a good
yeah.
question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I didn't start hydroxyurea as young as in children as young as some people did. I usually started hydroxyurea after maybe 2 or 3 years old, depending on because usually by that time kids didn't really have too many problems. But once they got a little bit older, especially if they were over 5, if they had any kind of severe symptoms, I would start hydroxyurea. And this was it's getting I was just thinking how long ago is this? Is 20 or 30 years ago. So things have changed over time. But now people start hydroxyurea in very young children. And the literature states that those children have very few symptoms of sickle cell disease, or their life is much better. The other thing with hydroxyurea is starting in young children is that it also decreases your risk of stroke. So young children who are on hydroxyurea, when they do transcranial Dopplers for stroke risk, those children are more likely to not have high velocities or be at risk for stroke. So hydroxyurea is beneficial in children. Again, you're talking about little kids, so you have to have a pediatrician or a pediatric hematologist who is familiar with sickle cell disease and has people on hydroxyurea who are young to know what tests need to be done and all that kind of things. And as kids grow, they're going to have to change their dose as well.
Really great question. And sickle cell is progressive, right? So that's what I'll add to this is, you know, from when your fetal hemoglobin drops off till like forever, sickle cell, even if you might not be in pain, is still there damaging organs and creating that damage within the body. And so if you start, and hydroxyurea essentially slows that damage down. So if you start earlier, then I can imagine, you have more of a benefit from starting earlier on hydroxyurea than starting later, like me, as an adult, because that damage has already occurred when I've started hydroxyurea. And I think for the most part, there could be some case studies where, and you might have mentioned this before, Dr. Q, where hydroxyurea may reverse some of that damage. But for the most part, these therapies don't reverse damage. And so I spent, and I think I started taking hydroxyurea in my 30s, probably, probably. Yeah,
Your
maybe.
pediatrician didn't start hydroxyurea on you?
Dr. Q's got jokes because he was my pediatrician. Um, it was a journey to get me on to hydroxyurea. Let's just say that. But I still had that damage up until when I started hydroxyurea. So the the goal is to start as early as possible to already delay that damage, as opposed to starting when you were when you're older. Now, is there still a benefit of starting at any age? Yes. So, hydroxyurea starts working as soon as you start taking it, right? And this is like, take this loosely, like not like the day of, right? You have to be on it for months and months in order for it to truly fully kick in. But um I am getting benefits of hydroxyurea as a 30 something year old. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, guys, but as a 30 something year old, um, and from here forward, as long as I take hydroxyurea, I'm benefiting from the benefits of hydroxyurea. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that was coherent, but um,
Well, we both
somebody,
have a friend who
somebody said, why were you opposed to starting hydroxyurea? You know what? I just didn't want to take medication in general, right? As I was just like, so there's a part of college where I was like, I don't have sickle cell. Like I literally told myself that because I didn't get sick often. I had this whole span where I didn't get crisis, I didn't get sick, I didn't feel fatigued. Like I just felt like it was to the point where I was like, I need these doctors to check to make sure I have a sickle cell disease because I don't think I have sickle cell disease. So, if you're feeling that way, right? And at this point, I did not know that, sickle cell is still causing damage. A lot of us think of sickle cell, we're only in trouble when we're in pain. And that's not true. And so I learned later on that, even as I'm sitting here right now, I'm not in any pain. Sickle cell is still sickling, like the sickle cell is still sickle celling. So that realization, and I felt fine, like I think intuitively, you don't think to take medication if you're feeling okay, like why would I be on medication? Why would I take painkillers if I don't have a headache? So I think that's what that was. I didn't want to be on medication, and it took me a long time to accept the fact that I would potentially need to be on medication for life. And that was really like a mental thing at the end of the day. Like, do I really want to be commit to being on medication for the rest of my life? And this isn't the only medication I'm taking that I have to take for the rest of my life. Um, so I think it was the idea of being on a medication for forever that really played with me. And I had to kind of come to that realization that this is really going to be good for me. I also started taking hydroxyurea because I learned of other therapies out there. And, hearing about gene therapy and a bone marrow transplant and curative. And I'm like, well, if these therapies come within my lifetime, I want to be in the best shape that I can be. So if I go and get gene therapy, like I expect to be completely normal. And so therefore I want to be able to climb Mount Everest and not have to worry about the damage that sickle cell had already done before getting that gene therapy. So that was my train of thought as well, as like, let me slow down the progression of sickle cell so that if I choose to get a cure, I can fully enjoy that cure and fully do whatever I want to do. There's this guy, his name is Jimmy, like Harry. He got a transformative therapy or a cure, and he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And that's exactly what I want to do. And that's exactly what I expect to do if I'm getting a cure. Like I'm going to do all the things I could never do. So I don't want that damage from sickle cell to stop me from doing that. So I know that's kind of a long winding process, but that's how I started taking hydroxyurea. And a lot of it was that mental me wrapping my head around taking a medication and wrapping my head around all of this and uh, partly activation and all of this. So yeah, not everybody's in a place where they're like willing to accept, yeah, I want to take this medication for, and I want to be on this, and not everybody's there. So that's
And,
my
uh,
long
and I think, like you say, nothing really happens. You're taking this medication and you don't really feel immediately, oh, I feel better. And you have to come in to see the doctor every couple of months. And when you start, even more often. So it's kind of like you're reminded that you have sickle cell disease over and over and over again because you
Yeah.
have to go in and get your blood drawn.
Yeah.
So
Felt like a
yeah,
patient again. And
yeah,
I'm
you're
over
a
here living
patient
my
again.
life.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And it
yeah.
does, and if you're not really, really sick, it doesn't, you're kind of like, why am I taking this? I'm not that sick. But it does prevent organ damage. So
Yeah, I said this in a video, but what got me was like, I had just become a mom also. So they're like, oh, hydroxyurea lowers your mortality rate. And I was like, okay, that's all you need. That's all you had to tell me. That's all you had to say. And I hopped right on it and I take every dose.
you don't have to have a kid to get on
But
hydroxyurea.
yes, no, you
No.
don't. You don't. Like, before having a child, I wanted to skydive. Now I don't want to skydive. So, you know, that's how that works.
That's a little window into Cassandra. She wanted to skydive. I mean, really?
Yeah, and I know another warrior who did skydive, and she was gonna take me skydiving, and we were gonna go
Oh, no.
together. I'm a bit reckless in that way. Like I said, I just traveled to Oman, 24-hour flight. But that's how I live, I guess.
Yeah. Cassandra's an adventurer.
I do like a good adventure. Um, all right. So thank you guys for indulging me on my rant here. Um, I'm trying to look for one last question. I saw a lot of things come in. How do I be consistent with my hydroxyurea? I don't like taking it, keep forgetting. Will I will I keep on getting pain crisis if I don't take them? That's a good question. I have an alarm, and I the to go to extend my rant further. Um, I said if I'm going to take this medication, I'm going to take it right so that I can get the full effect of this. I'm not going to half-ass it or anything like that. So what I do is I set an alarm because I'm a very forgetful person. Like I have an alarm to pick up my daughter from school. Like that's how forgetful I am. So I set an alarm, and every day at a certain amount of at a certain time the alarm goes off. If I'm like, say it's mine is at 7:30, if I'm not at home at 7:30, I just snooze it until I take my medication. So that's how I remind myself to take my medication every day, is setting an alarm on my phone. So hopefully that is helpful. I didn't start taking hydroxyurea for pain. I started taking it for organ preservation. So I didn't expect to be in less pain taking hydroxyurea. I know some people do expect to be in less pain, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they are not. But my main goal was let me protect my heart, let me protect my kidneys, let me protect my liver, let me provide protection. And so that's why I take hydroxyurea currently, is for that organ preservation and protection, essentially, and not necessarily for pain. Anything to add to that, Dr. Q?
No,
How to be
I think
consistent?
that's, I think that's reasonable, although I think people should, now that there's fewer drugs to take, people should start thinking about hydroxyurea. And it is safe if you take it as prescribed. And you get the blood tests to make sure your counts are okay. Um, it's a drug that needs to be monitored. So you can't, it's not like you can just take it and forget about it. You really need to be followed and monitored, and the dose has to be the right dose. Hydroxyurea is not a benign medication. You need someone who knows what's going on.
To answer a question prior, I am SS. I'm sickle cell SS. Um,
Hydroxyurea does help with pain, but people on hydroxyurea are not immune from pain. So if you were going to the ED every week or a couple times a month, that would slow down, but you could still have pain while you're on hydroxyurea. It's not like 100% effective, but you also have to take it. So if you miss doses, then got a very short half-life. That means if you miss 2 days, it's not working anymore. So
okay, I have my last question. I think I've never seen this question before, but this is great. How do you deal with PTSD from pain crisis? I'm paranoid every time I feel a little pain. That is deep.
that is I'm sure that's a common thing. Um, just like every other kind of, mental symptom like that, I think you need to talk to a social worker, psychologist, or someone who knows about sickle cell disease. And maybe everybody with sickle cell is susceptible to PTSD, and I think it's probably underreported. And but I think you need to talk to somebody about how you feel about that and what you can do to not have those feelings when you have some little twinge of pain and you think, oh, I'm gonna have a pain event here.
Does anybody else have any advice? Because I feel like this is a community question as well.
Yeah,
Like, how do you
yeah, it
guys move
is.
on from having such, a horrible pain crisis, and then any inkling of pain, it's just like your world crashes. Um, I'm trying to think I'm very good at forgetting bad stuff. Yeah, so I'll even forget, like, people have to remind me, oh, remember that time like you almost died? And I'll be like, oh yeah, that did happen. I don't know if that's healthy or not. But like I go through it and move on. I do have anxiety around being in pain though. Um, and I think that's normal. Catastrophizing is normal within sickle cell as well, like thinking the worst of any, like not even just pain, but any situation. That's a thing within chronic illnesses. So like you hear like somebody at the door and my thought is, oh my gosh, I'm getting robbed, instead of like something normal like, oh, the mailman is here. So that's definitely a thing within chronic illnesses, but I would just my 2 cents, and I don't know. I don't really like talking too much about mental health because I don't think I have it together or have the answers. But for me, just seeing a therapist, and this is advice for myself too. Like, I don't see a therapist currently, but I should. Um, but seeing a therapist to work through like, that PTSD, because PTSD is a mental health issue ultimately. Um, and caregivers also have PTSD as well from seeing you in that pain. So it's just everybody needs therapy if you know somebody with and love somebody with sickle cell. So yeah.
And I think if in your community, in your sickle cell community, there could be sickle cell groups where people get together, and usually those are run by a social worker or probably less likely a psychologist, but even a social worker who knows about sickle cell disease can help you with anxiety. I think, like Cassandra's saying, if you don't have some kind of anxiety about having sickle cell disease, you have a very short memory and you don't want to remember bad things because, I mean, if you're 20, you've had a lot of stuff happen to you.
Wait, somebody said if that's the case, I'll stop taking my hydroxyurea. I want to live long. No, that's the opposite. That's opposite of what I said. I got on hydroxyurea because I wanted to live long. I know, like sometimes it don't make sense. So thanks for putting that there. I don't want you guys to get the wrong message. Oh my gosh, why are you guys putting all the good questions now when we gotta go? Okay, Dr. Q, Dr. Q, I need you to say your
The
special
thing is, we have good
statement.
questions all along and they
Yes,
just don't stop.
yeah, true. If there's anything that's very, very like y'all really want answered, please send it to us at ask@sc101.org and we can get it answered.
And I try to answer them within 24 hours. So
Again, I said we, like I'm doing the work, but it really is Dr. Q and he's amazing. So yeah, your statement, Dr. Q.
I just saw something. If you live in California, um, Cayenne Wellness, which is in Southern California, has a program where if you have sickle cell disease, you can go to a therapist for free. And they have a group of Black therapists who throughout the state, and they have a deal with Cayenne Wellness where you can go to therapy for free. So that is really important. I kind of forgot about that, but that's a really good program in California. So my little talk at the end here is that we're Sickle Cell 101 and myself, we only provide information. The idea here is to give you information, like Cassandra was saying, to knowledge is power. And like she kind of said, unfortunately, because you have sickle cell disease, it's a orphan disease, and you need information. You need to know. You need a lot of information. So this is only for information. I'm not trying to diagnose, treat, or otherwise recommend any kind of therapy. That is up to your primary care provider. Um, it's information only. And if you want more information and your question didn't get answered, then you can write me at Ask Sickle Cell 101 and I'll send you an answer. Usually I try to look through the literature if I don't know the answer to make sure I'm giving real positive information.
That was short. I was hoping to catch up on some of these questions. One last question because I saw it come multiple times. Are
Okay.
are splenectomy in a 2-year-old SS patient more dangerous for the age?
What about a splenectomy?
Is a
Yeah.
splenectomy more dangerous for a 2-year-old with
Oh,
SS?
oh, oh. Again, we were talking about this with neurosurgery. Again, it depends on the surgeon, but a splenectomy depends. Well, first of all, you have to do, if your provider recommended that, then um, you probably need one. That's pretty young, but a pediatric surgeon, that's not a very complicated surgery, but a pediatric surgeon could could do that. It depends on the surgeon, of course, but it's not a very complicated surgery. And your provider needs to be involved in that to see whether or not in a 2-year-old, I doubt it, but whether you need a blood transfusion or you might have to be typing cross for blood and have blood on hand for the surgery, just to be sure that because people with sickle cell disease always need to have phenotypically matched blood. It's not like me, where if I was in a car accident and I needed blood, someone would just grab a bag off the shelf and say, oh, this guy's O positive, so let's just give him a couple units of O positive blood. That's not what happens in sickle cell. You have to have phenotypically matched blood because you're likely to make antibodies against the protein on the red blood cells. And once you do that, then you become more and more and more limited as to who can be your donor. So that's really important with blood transfusions or even having blood available for a surgery or something. It's not more dangerous in a 2-year-old.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for
Yeah,
joining us.
thank
The sun is
you.
in my face. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but you guys have some amazing questions, and we will be back in 2 weeks. And so, um, if you want to wait until then, feel free to ask then. But if it is urgent, please feel free to send it to ask@sc101.org. And just, yeah, thank you guys so much. My heart goes out to those of you that are in the hospital right now. I know being in a hospital is tough and just, you don't really have a choice but to be strong. And when people say, "Oh, just stay strong," it's like, well, what else? What else, right? But um, just know we're thinking of you, and I hope you have a speedy recovery and get back to normal. And for the rest of you, have a happy, happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend. Make sure you take the time to relax. We need it. And we will be back in 2 weeks.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay. Let me end on um mm, mm, mm. Where is it?